On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, is peak season over at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach? Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. So I am a follower of all the major news sites, and especially those that focus specifically on ocean shipping and freight. And a story came out on FreightWaves by Greg Miller, who's a fantastic reporter. But there was a couple of elements of the story that I really wanted to go in depth with and break down in a little bit more detail. So let's go ahead and head over to the story. This is Greg's story. Peak season over, container ship arrivals in Southern California fall. Daily container ship arrivals down 10% in November versus September. So the title here gives you the impression, at least it gave me the impression right off the bat reading this, it's like, well, wait a minute, is peak season over? Does this mean we're on the downward slope? Well, when you unpack the story a little bit, it becomes apparent that not only is this not true, but I have issues with the material that are being provided out there by Port of LA, for example, on the exact measures. So let's take a look at this. So this story is broken down into several parts. First part here talks about LA and Long Beach imports are normalizing. And this graph, and I'll zoom in here a little bit more for you so you get a little better look at here, talks about this issue about the normalization of the ports. So most of this material came from a press conference that was given by Gene Soroka, the head of the Port of LA. And on that press conference, he also had Secretary of Transportation Peter Buttigieg with him. And so a lot of this information was disseminated then, but not all information was readily available at the time. One of them is this: the LA Long Beach combined monthly imports by year. And what they're looking at is the number of TEUs that are coming in. The blue line is 2018, yellow line 2019, green 2020, red 2021. And you see for 2021, we're largely over normal here throughout the year and just getting close to getting caught up in August. Then all of a sudden in September and now in October, it's kind of plateaued out, meaning that we're below the 2020 level. And obviously that issue would give some indication that, okay, wait a minute, the number of containers that are being imported to the port are decreasing. And that would be an indication that things are starting to slow down. And my argument with this is it's not an indication that things are starting to slow down in terms of the volume coming in. It's an indication that the ports are slowing down. And that's a different metric. This means that the number of containers the ports are handling are slowing down. Remember, there are a record number of vessels off the port right now. And so the ports should be going up. Why are they not going up? That's the issue that's underlying here. That's the metric that needs to be examined. So the next measure, or the next element that they looked at, was this one right here. This is the average daily container ship arrivals in LA and Long Beach. How many ships are arriving off the berth every day in LA and Long Beach? And one of the arguments is that, well, as of November 17th, it is below the October and quite a bit below the September. And again, this is not the total number, it is the average daily arrival. So for example, in September, it was a little over 6 vessels a day were arriving. In October, it's a little over 5.5. And so far in November, we're under 5.5, which again would indicate to most people, okay, the number of ships arriving is slowing down. But the question is it? Because I think this data is missing a key component. This is the signal report given out every day by the Port of LA. And this gives you a snapshot of information and details of what's going on in the port. Notice right here, week 46, November 14th through November 20th, the import volumes are measuring at 142,000 containers. Next week, the anticipated import volume, 87,000. That's almost a 40% drop in containers right there. And then it dropped down to 105,000 containers. Now, I want to draw your attention to some key issues in this report. This report also goes in here to tell you about the vessels that are currently at anchor, 32 vessels at anchor with an average stay or wait of 18.5 days. You'll see some vessels here for an inordinate amount of time. Hyundai Prestige, 52 days. Ball Peace, 55 days. AS Constantina, 46 days. Let me be clear. What's going on in the ports of LA and Long Beach is this. You would never, ever board an aircraft to fly to London if you did not know that plane had a scheduled time to arrive at the airport. When you depart from your international flight destination, departure point in US, you know that you have an arrival time in the airport in London. Ships are sailing from China, from Asia over to the US without arrivals. They are just showing up. They are looking for a berth of opportunity, which is clogging the system up. Why are ships being permitted to sail across and arrive at the ports of LA and Long Beach and think for any possible moment they're going to have a berth without prior booking the berth? That is what's happening. And understand, it doesn't do any good to send these ships to other ports. You want to fly into London. If I tell you, well, there's no room in London today, but we will land you in Warsaw, well, great. Now you're in Poland. You still have got to get back to London. That doesn't solve the issue for you. You're on the ground in Europe, but you're not in the right spot where you need to be. That's what's going on. The other element is this. These are the vessels due at anchor. There are 8 of them listed here. You'll see 8 vessels listed in here. But if you go to marine traffic, you'll remember the other day, talked about a story where the Port of LA and Long Beach is ordering vessels to hold 150 miles off the coast. This is the CMA CGM Topaz. Estimated arrival November 19th at 12 o'clock in the Port of LA. She is stopped drifting at 0.2 knots. She is 350 miles off the coast, well outside the 150 mile. She's due in LA on November 19th. Come back over here. I don't see CMA CGM Topaz listed here. And if you take some time and kind of tool around in this area out here, one of the things you begin to notice is some other ships. Here's the MSC Alina due in the Long Beach. Everfine right there. She's heading into Los Angeles, due in November 26th. She's 0.6 knots, underway using engine. Go here, due in on the 26th. She's not listed coming in. So one of the things that we're not seeing on the arrival reports are ships that are outside the drift zone. We don't know how many of these other vessels could be hanging out there at the 150 mile part. Come in here, here's the Express Berlin. She's due into Los Angeles. She is one of those vessels that we know are coming in. Express Berlin, look at the list right here. I don't see Express Berlin listed here. She's due into LAX on December 8th. So she's not even showing up on the list of vessels that are waiting. So if our arrival is, are those ships included in the daily arrival? Because I don't see them on the signal report. And what this means is the average days waiting from Anchorage to LA berth has been increasing tremendously, 18.5. Are we not factoring those vessels that are drifting 300 miles off the coast right now? And can I also just say one other thing? Drifting 300 miles off the coast is a terrible position you're putting these ships and their crews in with winter coming into the North Pacific. This is not a place you want to be drifting around. Off the anchorage right here, off LA, between Santa Barbara, Santa Catalina Island, this is a place that's at least a protected anchorage to a certain, or protected area, a drift zone, but now being way off the coast like this is a terrible position you're putting these vessels in. Just, again, the report here is talking about the rising number of ships at anchor or loitering is creating the perception of a rising tide of U.S. imports, when in fact, higher wait times for ships are being caused by landslide logistics issues and gridlocks at the ports, not higher inbound container and ship arrivals. I question the issue about, are we tracking the exact number of ships that are coming in? The Arrival here, you see this too in this graph that, again, they have in here from the Marine Exchange, looking at all this data, the number of ships, the ships at berth, the ships at anchor. Notice this goes back to April 2020. Very few ships at anchor. Usually you would only get one or two, a handful. But then all of a sudden in the summer, we start seeing it happen. And then all of a sudden in the fall, starting in September and October, you start seeing it happen. Peaks there in February of 2021, dips down to about June, July, but then the holiday season kicks off in full bore, and we just see this escalating. Again, the headline of this story is peak season over. I'm not sure we're seeing peak season being over yet, because the other issue we have is we got to get caught up. We got to get all these ships processed off. All those goods are off there, maybe 500,000 to 600,000 containers. They got to come off in February. We're going to see the Chinese New Year. That'll stop things over in China. That'll give us a brief hiatus. But then post Chinese New Year, you're going to see an influx of vessels coming in because the ILWU, the longshoremen and warehouse workers, have a contract negotiation that's up in the summertime. People are going to try to get as much freight in as they can before those new renegotiations break down potentially. I'm not sure, I'm not saying they will, but they may. But until they're ironed out and made, people are going to be rushing cargo in early 2022 to beat the potential of a strike. And then by the summer of 2022, we're in holiday season once again. And so the idea that peak season is over, I'm not sure about. Then the last part about back here, decrease in outbound empty containers. So one of the things that is being hyped right now, here is LA's dwell report, which used to be front and center on their webpage, but now you got to it's buried a bit. You got to find it. On November 13th, they were at 64,000 containers. They're at 66,000 today. They have decreased overall when they started this in November 1st. November 1st, they were about at 87,000. They're down to 66,000 now. So they have decreased. We've seen it decrease, but we haven't seen it disappear. And one of the things I think we're seeing going on here is kind of twofold. One, the number of ships coming on berth are not as much. We see that in the stats. We see that with the arrival of ships coming down. We see that with the number of containers that are coming into LA and Long Beach. They are not taking off as many containers as they can be taking off because there's more ships there. And that tells me that they're clearing out the dwell. They're trying to get this down. Again, hyper demurrage was supposed to go into effect on November 15th. It's got pushed back to November 22nd, which is Monday. Not going to be surprised to see it pushed back to another week at that point because they're making a dent in this. But what are they paying for that dent? I think one of the things they're doing is not offloading as many cargo off the vessels as they want. Again, this hyper demurrage is going to be passed from the ocean carrier to the shipper to the consumer. And the port liaison, John Bakari, is in full favor of this, yet the FMC has not really said anything about this hyper demurrage, which is an issue. I want to go back to this story for one last thing. During a public hearing on October 29th, Matt Schrapp, CEO of the Harbor Trucking Association, argued the biggest source of LA Long Beach congestion is not import containers that dwell too long, but rather empty outbound containers that dwell too long. Empties are the issue, he said. In the press conference, Gene Soroka talked about on Tuesday, we got about 65,000 empty container units sitting on the dock right now. That's up from 55,000 just a couple of days ago. He was asked about sweeper ships. These are empty vessels that come in to pick up all the empty containers and exports in one swoop. We've seen 6 sweeper ships so far pick up a little more than 17,500 TEUs of empties, and there are 2 more on the way that can pick up 2,500 TEUs, but we've got to do a lot more than that. So what Soroka is talking about is a grand total of 20,000 TEUs that have been picked up by sweepers. 20,000. If you look at to date for 2021, the total number of export containers, if you start looking at all these exports that are coming out right here, total empty exports, total exports, 433,000 total exports in just October. If you look at calendar to date, total exports, 4.3 million containers. He's talking about 20,000 containers being swept up out of 4.3 million. And that's the issue. One of the things that I think this story reveals, and again, I love Greg Miller and his story. And again, I think this is the data giving it a little bit more of an insight here, a little bit more of a dig into it, looking at where the material is coming from. I think LA and Long Beach are doing a couple of things here. Number one, they are moving containers off the terminals. That's perfectly clear. And again, we're at record levels. We're seeing more containers move than ever before. And hats off to everybody at LA and Long Beach, the longshoremen, the crane operators, the truckers, rail guys, everybody, pilots, you name it, everybody. Just hats off. It's an amazing job. And maybe I come across sometimes not doing that. I need to thank them. They're doing a fantastic job keeping our economy moving. However, one of the things we have to be careful about is putting a rosy picture on this and realizing that the issue at play here is we got a lot of ships coming into the Port of LA, more than can be handled by the Port of LA here effectively. Ships that are sitting there almost 2 months, ships that are now drifting 300 miles off the coast and are not showing up in any of the data we're dealing with here. Is containers slowing down in the ports? That graph showed it. We see that we're below the 2020 level. That means we're not moving as many containers out. The dwell report is coming down, which means they're moving containers off the terminal, but it's not coming down fast enough. And what we have not seen is a dwell report on empty containers and export containers in the terminal. As Matt Schrapp said, the big issue here is the terminals are clogged with empties. There should not be a ship pulling off a berth in LA and Long Beach unless it's full to capacity with empties and exports heading back across. The desire here is to push ships off before they're fully loaded by the terminals to bring the next ship on and move it and to get caught up in the terminal. We need to get a handle on this. The terminals, the port executive for LA and Long Beach, both Gene Soroka, and Mario Cardona has got to, Cardona, I always get his name wrong, I apologize, Mario. They need to get the terminals operating. The port envoy, a new maritime administrator, the Federal Maritime Commission, we need everybody involved. We need everybody involved in doing this. And I think this issue is not over by any means. We have got to get a handle on our infrastructure issue here coming into the Port of LA and Long Beach. Just did a video yesterday on the Port of Vancouver and the issue befalling it. We've got to get semblance of order here and visibility. But what I'm afraid they're doing now is pushing these ships off the ocean. We're not seeing them, and we could actually be setting ourselves up for a worse disaster should something befall one of those ships off the port. So, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos when they come out. Give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, please feel free to contribute to my Patreon page. And if you're in the industry and you're leaving me comments, if you're in the administration and I'm hearing back from you, be sure to listen to all our videos and past videos so you realize what we've been talking about here on what's going on with shipping for quite a while. Until our next episode, Sal signing off.